Well, every month we're working with the Wisconsin Historical Society to highlight the state's history.
In this month's edition of Hidden Treasures, Simone Munson from the Historical Society takes us through the new exhibit on Wisconsin's role in the suffrage movement.
Why was someone anti-suffrage? What was the theory behind that? And a lot of people believed, both men and women believed, that their vote was represented by their husband's vote or their father's vote, and so they didn't need the vote. And there are lots of different arguments that are made for trying to exclude women from this. So there was this idea for much of the 19th century and before that women kind of belonged in the domestic sphere and men belonged in the political sphere, and you did not cross over. And so they're trying to get at this idea that women don't belong in the political sphere, so they don't need the right to vote.
So Wisconsin has a sort of a unique role in the suffrage movement and the final ratification.
Yeah, so Wisconsin is the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan all vote on the same day to ratify the amendment, but Wisconsin is the first state that turns our paperwork into the State Department in Washington, D.C., so we get the distinction of being the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. This was the piece of paper that was sent from the federal government that said, this is the language of the amendment and we want you to vote on this language.
Is this the original one?
That's the original one.
That's amazing. Yeah. And this exhibit exemplifies Wisconsin's journey, right?
Yeah, so the We Stand on Our Shoulders exhibit at the Wisconsin Historical Museum is talking about the role of women's suffrage, the suffrage movement, and the passage of the 19th Amendment. And then we also wanted to go to the next step and say what happened after the passage of the 19th Amendment. So how were women first involved in politics? What was the road for getting more equal representation within our government?
And there was some resistance to all this at first.
There is, yeah. It takes a while for women to achieve the right to vote in this process.
It is a menace to the home, men's employment, and to all business.
That's right. That's right, yeah. It's a long struggle. It goes through many different phases before women are successful in convincing the men of our country, really, that we deserve the right to vote. These are tunics that women would have worn to rallies to help support the suffrage cause. In 1916 in Chicago, the Republican National Convention took place in Chicago. And so they wanted to gather at a place where they knew that there would be lots of men thinking about politics and this sort of issue. So yeah, we opened the exhibit with the tunics and sort of talking about how women were able to try and convince the population that they deserved the right to vote.
And this is an original one. This is a real one.
Right, exactly. So some of the tunics are reproductions, but this is an original tunic that was worn in Chicago in 1916, along with some of the other armbands and banners.
Were they all different colors, or did everyone wear yellow?
So in all of the Wisconsin tunics were yellow. Every state kind of designed their own outfits and regalia, but the colors of the suffrage movement are often yellow, purple, and white.
As we go along here, are these some high-profile Wisconsin women?
Yeah, so all the women that are on this wall of the exhibit had some important role to play in the suffrage movement. Women like Lavinia Goodell, who was the first woman allowed to practice law in Wisconsin, and she had to petition all the way to the Wisconsin Supreme Court before she's given the right to practice law, and so she doesn't actually get permission to practice law until 1877 or 1879. I'm sorry, and this is the certificate that grants her permission to be able to practice law in the state. But other women were doing their jobs, you know, printing newspapers, giving speeches, trying to convince the men of our country that this is an important issue that they should agree with. So, you know, very well-known women like Belle Case La Follette, who's also a Wisconsin First Lady, and Theodora Winton Yeomans, who had a regular column in the Waukesha Freeman where she would write about suffrage issues. The press plays a very important role in helping women get out the word about why this is important. Getting the right to vote is just the first step. So we also wanted to highlight women who were influential after the right to vote is achieved. And so people like Bernice Lindsay, who was an advocate in Milwaukee for fair housing and was involved in a lot of political activism regarding fair housing in Wisconsin. This is Val Phillips's desk.
Really?
So Val Phillips, who is the first African-American and first woman who's elected to the Milwaukee Common Council, this is the desk that she sat at as a representative of the city of Milwaukee, helping to, pass city ordinance and make decisions about, desegregation and workers' rights and all sorts of things.
It was a rough road for women in Wisconsin, wasn't it?
It is. It's a rough road for women everywhere. One of the things that people often think is once women got the right to vote, then that opened up all these doors for people. But what we see is that women aren't actually able to enter the political sphere for some time. So there's a short period in the 1920s where we see women starting to occupy political office for the first time. And then that kind of dies down. We have the Great Depression and World War II, and women aren't being as active in politics. And it's not until the 60s and 70s when we start to see women re-entering this political sphere and really starting to take office. But unfortunately, even at its peak, women only ever occupy 1/3 of government. So we make up 50% of the population, but only take up 1/3 of our government seats.
To this day.
To this day.
There's a parallel today, yeah. It is really worth seeing.
It is fascinating.
Very interesting.
It'll be on display until January of next year, so you have plenty of time. And there's a big celebration in August on the exact date.
Right. I think that's August 26th.
Yep.
But look at their website for more information. And thanks to Simone. We're really enjoying exploring our hidden treasures at the Wisconsin Historical Society.
And this one is at the museum on the square.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be right back with the final check your forecast.
Very well for that.